Today on our show, we celebrate the end of 10 years of the MCU with the release of Endgame.
Welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comic books and graphic novels worth having on your shelf, and sometimes the movies based on those. I'm Todd A.
And I am Taylor Trask. I don't know why I said it was such drama. I was about to make up some name, I think, and it just
I thought you were doing what I used to do, which was say my name with a question mark at the end of it. I'm Taylor Trask.
Well, I'm still in Game of Thrones mode where I have like a rap name as a lead in, so I'm just like, right. Be simple old me. I have to have a
Taylor Trask.
Yeah, just the inevitable Taylor Trask. How about that?
Inevitable. I like perfect. As we have previewed a whole bunch on this and our Wednesday in Westeros podcast, today we're talking about Avengers Endgame.
Yes.
Which I wouldn't say I have copious notes on, but I have notes on, and I know you have notes on them, but I still feel like somehow we're winging it. I guess that's how it feels when there is a freaking 3-hour movie to discuss. Like there's no way to outline thoughts on that all. It's huge. It's immense.
Yeah. And we are not, we're just going to like two big things right out of the gate. Number one, spoilers all the way around. Yeah. If you haven't if you haven't seen it, yet, or if you care deeply about spoilers in any way, shape, or form, please pause, because we're not going to say it too much more after this. Everything basically henceforth possibly and probably will contain many, many spoilers, including the ending. So just know that is coming very, very quickly. And secondly, we're not going to do a play-by-play. No. We're not going to go beat by beat or scene by scene. So don't worry. We're not going to recount the movie to you. That's not, you've seen it. It represents itself. I think we're going to focus more on some thematic things.
Yeah.
Obviously talk about what we liked and didn't like in terms of moments or scenes or characters or whatever. But there's a lot, this is being the ending of kind of 10 years, just like with Game of Thrones. We're in the end game of that show too. So this movie, another ending of an era,
a heavy weekend for endings, for sure.
Well, think about how many kids, were 10 years old when Iron Man came out, and their entire formative,
crazy,
right? They're 2021 now. And so it's like their entire formative lives, just like the kids who grew up with Harry Potter, either the books, the movies, or both. When that series ended, there was a lot of sort of like, wow, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? So like with both of these things ending, probably more obviously the MCU, a lot of kids, a lot of young adults are kind of looking out there like, wow, what next? Where does my life go from here? And there was, as sad and sort of fulfilling as the ending was, I think a lot of kids or grown-up kids are, looking at this as with even more heft. I think back to not quite the same thing. It was only 3 years, but when Lord of the Rings ended, that was 2003. I was mid-college, just about to graduate college. That started my freshman year and then just kind of went along. So in a similar kind of way, it mapped to my own life or evolution. It became this sort of tradition that my friends and I did. I remember watching that end credit sequence in Return of the King, and that beautiful Annie Lennox song's playing. I got very emotional. Not just because it was the end, a beautiful song and everything, but just the idea that this is the last time I was going to sit in this theater and watch this, or have this relationship with this thing. So I can only imagine what 10 years does to a person.
Honestly, all I can think about those 10-year-olds that saw Iron Man is, you're so fucking spoiled.
Yeah.
You don't know what it was like with Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Oh, Lord.
Batman Forever or whatever. Come on, guys.
Yeah, anyway, we had to suffer through the bad Batman movies. Oof.
Should we start as we usually do with describing like what were your theater conditions for this?
Yes, absolutely.
You had a pretty killer one. Like I got an unexpected text from you.
Well, I had planned to see it Sunday afternoon at the Alamo Draft House, and somewhere around Thursday afternoon, I was like, you know what? we've been talking about this. I've been lamenting the loss of the midnight premiere and all of these things, and I was thinking like I'm not going to get anything done on Friday if I don't see it. I'm just going to be thinking about it and trying to avoid spoilers by looking at more spoilers because I've looked at all of them. And I was just kind of thinking, I'm like, this is the last time. I doubt there are tickets, but let me just look. And sure enough, there were a smattering of open seats available at 9:45, 10, 10:30, and so forth. So I grabbed a 9:45 ticket and I went Thursday night. And we have this gigantic ass theater very near my house. That's like this, Tinseltown 25 or whatever it is. Kind of like the Thoroughbred, very, very similar to the Thoroughbred in Franklin, Cool Springs, Tennessee,
but nice.
Sure, yeah.
Kind of like the Thoroughbred in 2003.
Exactly. I've not been there lately, so my sort of impression of the Thoroughbred is still circa early 2000s. So kind of like a lot like that, but a little bit more upscale. Every theater was just running that movie. It was, everybody had reserved tickets, but they were just running through the lines.
Yeah.
Just again, so I ended up seeing it not in a giant space, but in a smaller, sort of theater, still pretty big enough screen. But it wasn't like the main arena theater that they pack every, which is kind of what I was going for. But that was jammed. So I saw it with a mostly adult crowd, being 9:45 on a Thursday night.
I didn't realize you went that late. I thought you were out at 9:45.
No, I was out at 1:30.
Oh my God.
It was a late night, to be sure, but I'm glad I did it. It wasn't quite the raucous audience. I think there were some moments I wish the audience the participation was a little higher. But it did have the you could feel the attention of the audience in that room. Everybody in there, I think, had been at least to the last 5 years worth, if not all 10 years worth of film. So there was a palpable familiarity, and just like, I think everybody was there for the same reason.
Oh, wow. I went to my local theater. I did see it in Dolby Atmos, which I couldn't really tell for this one. I mean, I know I appreciated the experience, but there was no like extra oomph. I have been to a couple of Dolby Atmos movies where something is like way more severe in the audio.
Okay.
And this was
Blade Runner 2049, for example. It's way more severe.
Right. That's what I'd heard.
All the way through.
I never ended up seeing that. I went to a 2:55 p.m. show, which was just the benefit of being a freelancer.
What day?
On Friday.
Okay.
So, and uniquely, this is the opening weekend of the 20th anniversary of the Newport Beach Film Festival. So, this theater, which only has like a few theaters, actual like screens in it, could not run Endgame in every screen. I think they were running it on at least 2, maybe 3, but they had Film Fest movies going on. Wow. So they're like loading in. There was I walk up and there's this huge, like cordoned off line. No one was in it. And I thought, wow, is that the line for tickets for like later showings or something? No. That was the Film Fest line. Because then I walk in and they have like a backdrop set up for red carpet photos, and they have these different tables outside with merch and stuff. And so there's all this extra foot traffic in addition to the Avengers traffic.
You should have put on a beanie and pretended you were an indie film auteur, and you could just walk the red carpet and just made fake appearances.
There were definitely Avengers people there to see the Avengers that were taking selfies on their little fake red carpet, because it was just set there like there was nobody on it. It wasn't like an entrance to it. It was just a backdrop for photos of the filmmakers.
Okay.
Anyway, this was about the same time that I saw Infinity War last year. I did see that like afternoon. That might have been like 4:00 or something. And again, like you and I talked about opening day stuff, my theater was, strangely for Infinity War, there were like a ton of empty seats right next to me. It was mostly full. And I know they sold those seats because when I looked for Infinity War, I was only able to buy the end row ticket or whatever. And then all the seats next to me were empty. So that person just didn't show up. But this one was packed.
Nice.
And
good.
Endgame was packed and the audience was really into it. A lot of clapping, like,
good
thing I don't get in movies, but just
I love it.
for like entrances, like when someone shows up and they all clap, and it was like, what?
Doesn't it make it more exciting though with a movie like this to have
It is
that?
interesting, but I'm always like, boy, have you ever been to a symphony or stage production?
I'm sure they're more attentive to the cultural norms of those things, Todd.
I definitely wanted everyone to shut up at the beginning because it was so quiet.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
And people were like just excited and talking and stuff. But anyway, that was my experience. It was a lot of good feedback and stuff. It was definitely a butt numbathon. Like I felt those 3 hours. And I definitely had to choose a very opportune moment to run to the bathroom, but only once. So
which moment was that?
I had read a couple articles on best time to pee that were trying to do this on not spoiling it. And honestly, I could have written a better article on that, I think, after watching it, but I went when Hawkeye was in Japan.
Okay. That's about right.
I don't care about Hawkeye. I would have laughed my brains out if during the cold open he had also turned into dust and no one thought to look for him for the entire movie. I would have thought that was the funniest thing ever. But I mean, I don't dislike him, but he's a stooge, of Shield and Hydra.
I did laugh, but while we're on the topic, I did laugh at the very end credits when it started, and then you suddenly see this like Jeremy Renner animation and like his signature, and I started laughing. I'm like, wait, is this what the hell's going on now? Like, because I thought it was just gonna be him. like it was just.
I did that too, where I was like, wait, how do you get singled out for the?
Yeah, it's just some kind of like weird fan service tribute to Hawkeye because he wasn't in the first one. Like there's gonna be like a joke or something, and then all the other things started happening, and I was like, oh, I see. But it was sort of funny. I almost wonder if they didn't do that intentionally. Like, watch, everybody's gonna be like, holy shit, it's Hawkeye's movie. No.
I mean, I gotta give it credit. Like, I really love that. Like, it opened with his family.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, it was cool. I definitely like Linda Cardellini in that role. Don't really care for Jeremy Renner or Hawkeye in general. But yeah, the kids were great. Love that he calls his daughter Hawkeye. I wonder if that's the actor that's going to be in the show with him. That would be amazing.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so I thought we'd also talk about the structure of the movie as a way of getting into it, because
let's just
almost like 2 acts. Like it's almost a Pixie song of like the quiet part and then the loud part. They stomp on that distortion pedal right in the middle and do not go back to being quiet after that.
Yeah. Well, I want to before we even go that far, I want to kind of pull back even further.
Oh, okay.
I have been making the case for a while now that these are not movies so much as very, very expensive episodes of a long-running TV series. And I do feel like it would, especially when taken with Infinity War, it felt and had the sort of emotional gravitas of a series-ending episode, like the last episode of Cheers, the last episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, the last episode of The Office. It had this sort of like, oh, if this was a TV show, this is kind of what they'd be doing. Like, this is kind of how they'd send everybody off. These are the sort of emotional beats you'd want. And it doesn't make it bad. It's just, it's much more that. And I'll even take it one step further. Think about how few cultural touch points we have now, especially as it relates to TV. We have Game of Thrones for 3 more weeks, and then that loses its cachet as like the water cooler thing. Is there anything else? Maybe Stranger Things. There's very few other things that we all watch in unison except for these Marvel movies.
People love that This Is Us show.
Yes, but that's still not everybody. Like, you can't just, it's very hard to find a universe, like walk down the street and just say This Is Us and have people go, oh my God, I just watched last night, like you can with Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad when it was still on.
I think more people watch This Is Us than watch Stranger Things.
Really?
I think so.
I
remember being very depressed when I realized that like the Mad Men audience was, a fifth of
but
some
my
other
point,
popular TV show.
My ultimate point is that these movies they do function. This does function the last 10 years, like the run of Cheers. It has that same kind of like, oh, we're going to miss these guys. And just the way they sort of treated this was as a finale. I mean, there wasn't any end credit sequences. I think for that reason, it is very much like we're not going to tell you much more. It's not like, and it wasn't like Spider-Man will return. It's just like, nope, this is it. Yeah. And everything else is either new or it's a different thing. But this series is now over.
I think we needed that. Like we needed a punctuation mark on this. It was getting hard to like keep up with all those things. Like everything leading into the next thing is not always a satisfying, like
100%.
Yeah. Aesthetic, like absorption kind of thing. I don't know. Yep. That's not a great way to experience art. Like it's never done.
Somebody else made this great point. They're like, if Ant-Man and the Wasp had come out 10 years ago, it would have been revolutionary. It would have been like, holy crap. Or even better yet, like 15 years ago, like whenever that really terrible Wolverine movie came out.
Oh my God.
Like if Ant-Man and the Wasp came out that summer, it'd be like one of the biggest things ever. But because it was just on the back of all these other movies, all of this continuity, it lost some of that special sauce that, I think future generations will get more of when they can watch it on its own as its own thing. If they're not interested in watching the MCU TV series start to finish. But like it is, I want some of these movies to feel a little more special again. And the only way that can happen is if you start fresh and untangle a lot of this connected thread go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted. You were using.
Well, I was just going to say, like, it was a wonderful experiment that proved insanely profitable and satisfying to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I just don't want, maybe with exceptions of Fast and Furious, I don't want a lot of these, and that's the temptation. All these studios are going to be like, we need to create our, super duper expensive TV shows on the silver screen, and it's just kind of like,
Well, this had so much magic behind it. Like the cast and I don't know.
Best acting we've ever seen from these folks.
And just the sort of legion of directors who I mean, it's unbelievable that you can kind of go through the Marvel movies and pull out director choices that you liked. I mean, it's Jon Favreau establishing the tone of Iron Man, and Peyton Reed doing Ant-Man, and Ryan Coogler doing Black Panther, and like Taika Waititi, and but even before Taika, like Kenneth Branagh doing the first Thor.
Ooh,
like,
good pull.
How crazy is that? I did want to blow your mind briefly, which I think is germane to this point, which is you said something about that terrible Wolverine movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine came out after Iron Man.
Did it?
Iron Man was 2008. The first Wolverine was 2009.
Wow.
Can you believe that? Like Iron Man existed and Fox went, no, we're sticking with this terrible thing.
Damn.
Like, I mean, that is a mind blower in itself of like how forward thinking I think the Marvel Studios was at that point. And maybe they didn't even know what they had, but we were introduced to the Avengers initiative and Sam Jackson's character and stuff. And
they just had the balls to stick with it. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
And a big bunch of that credit goes to Ike Perlmutter, who was Kevin Feige's co-conspirator at that point. There was since been a coup to remove him from the MCU, but like that guy was pushed. And then there was that other guy, like that other, what's his name?
Avi Arad.
Yes, Avi Arad. Thank you.
He was shepherding all the Marvel movies though. So he was involved in like all the Spider-Mans for it and Hulk.
You always see Avi Arad's name on the credits on those Spider-Man movies, like right away, the Sam Raimi ones. It's like Avi Arad. You're like, oh my God, that guy. Yeah, he was huge.
I mean, he's a pioneering thinker, I think, for Marvel, like in that way.
Yeah. And so you've got, I mean, in a lot of those, I'll be honest, those Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies feel very, very much like MCU movies. If you go back and watch them now, you're like, oh, these could have easily been just MCU components. If the MCU was around then, or even not, they still hold up fairly well today. You could just add them in, and it would.
I haven't gone back, but I do remember. I mean, I know it's universally mocked, but I guess when Tobey Maguire was celebrating like his 35th birthday in Spider-Man 3 or whatever, it was like, okay,
he is Spider-Man.
Get out.
That's the whole point. I mean, I love Tom Holland too. I liked the Andrew Garfield movie, not that second.
I never saw the second one. So
Anyway,
We digress on the Spider-Man missteps.
But they stuck with it. They built it up to this point, and it's a very special thing. And so this Endgame does serve as both the end of the story, but also the end of all of this.
Yeah.
A lot of this team won't be back together again for a while, if ever. Obviously, a lot of these characters aren't coming back as we know them, or as we did know them. So,
well, I'm gonna railroad us back into that structure of the movie.
Yeah, please. Sorry,
because something you said just reminded me of this. I think in taking all of that in, I was very appreciative. Now, I've since rewatched Infinity War a few times, and I do not think this is as true as I initially thought. But my first impression of Infinity War was it was a bunch of quick moving scenes from like, group of characters to group of characters. It's not, I mean, it has really, I think, great pacing in retrospect, but I really appreciated, in light of this being the end game, that we got to spend so much time with people in the beginning. And it really did feel like two movies to me. Like, here's the emotional center of the movie, and then here's going to be the action, the crazy ass action that happens at the end. As much as I love that cast, I did find myself missing everyone else. And really? I was like, I want to see the Guardians of the Galaxy. And granted, we'll talk about it when we get to the favorite things that we each had from the movie, but I would for sure watch 10 more movies starring Chris Hemsworth as Thor and Bradley Cooper as Rocket Raccoon, like as a duo.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if that were just, oh my gosh, that's the spinoff series I want to see.
Well, real quick, it's funny you have that perception of it, because these feel like totally different movies to me. Like, I would almost as if like they're, like it's David Nutter and Miguel Sapochnik.
You mean between Infinity War and Endgame? Yeah,
I mean, it's the same writers, Marcus and McFeely and the Russo brothers directing, writing. They made them both at the same time, and they feel like totally different movies.
Well, I agree. No, I do think they feel like different movies. I just felt like this one, they knew it was the end, and they were able to draw out the emotional stuff in the beginning. Whereas Infinity War has to establish like where all these creatures, creatures, I don't know what I'm saying, groups of heroes are, like it's very much like outer space, and then there's the Guardians, and then New Asgard, and there's, that it was hopping around a lot, whereas this one was centered.
Yeah. And it was a smaller ensemble, so everybody had more room, more space to breathe, and they let so many scenes just have all the time they needed, which thank God, because it's like I needed for any of these moments to work. For the Paul Rudd scene where he sees his daughter again, like some of the best acting you're ever going to see from Paul Rudd. Like, that scene needed all the time and space. In the context of the story, for that to really pay off the way it did. There's so many scenes like that where it's like, oh, we need to take our time, and I'm so thankful they did. Like, they earned it and they used it. It's not like they chickened out. It's like, well, we got to make the money. It's like, people are going to come regardless, so let's do what's right for the story for these characters.
No, you said that so much better than I did. That's exactly what I was trying to say. I was totally thankful for all that time. I wanted to jump into something that you and I talked about last night, not on a podcast, which was the 5 years later conundrum. But I'm not sure if you're ready to jump into that or not.
Well, do we want to talk about that, or that in the context of all their time travel shenanigans? Because I think
I think it sort of wraps together. So you and I definitely pointed out. Well, you pointed out to me the what did you just call it? The shenanigans.
Yes.
The 5 years later, and I definitely thought just the moment of that title card appearing was a little too over dramatic. Because it seemed like this is what I said to you last night. It seemed like a very mechanical device to explain two things: to give Tony time with his daughter, and to have the shock of Scott showing back up and explaining, I've really only been gone for 5 hours in my mind.
Yeah.
So I get that we needed that impact, but you pointed out that it has some weird time travel implications, jump into that. Yeah.
There are things, and these are not original thoughts. I mean, I noticed them at the time, but there are things that others have echoed since. When you say 5 years in the future, especially after a catastrophic event, like half the population failing or fading, a lot of things get introduced to the story that are not conveniently hand waved away. For example, especially because they reinforce them visually. So you see that haunting image of all those boats gathered around the Statue of Liberty, just abandoned. Yeah. You see all these cars, when Scott is walking through San Francisco, just these abandoned neighborhoods, that creepy scene with that lone kid biking past him, and just like, this almost like a Stephen King movie. So clearly they recognize the world as being not a safe or good place since all this happened. 5 years has taken its toll physically and emotionally. So when you bring half the population back in a snap, in an instant, where does all the food come from? How does everybody, how has the economy moved on? How are jobs allocated now? Like, how do we just go back to what we were before? You can make the case, well, it won't take long. We'll just, we'll settle back into it. And I think, okay, fine. But then it starts to feel more like a TV show where just some of these details are conveniently waved away. One of the, strangely enough, we're talking about time, one of the shows that kept coming to mind as I was watching Infinity War was Doctor Who. And Doctor Who has this long-running sort of challenge of, do you make an episode that is emotionally satisfying but skimps on the technical detail or doesn't care as much about the technical detail? Or do you make one that's very loyal to the logic and the technicality of the story, but maybe isn't as emotionally impacting? Strangely, the latest season of Doctor Who with Jodie Whittaker does both a lot, which is why it's so badass and so satisfying and wonderful on every level. That's for another day. But some of those earlier episodes, those David Tennant episodes, some of those Matt Smith episodes, a lot of people loved Russell T Davies as a showrunner because he always erred on the side of emotion. A lot of people loved Stephen Moffat as a showrunner because he erred on the side of the technical storytelling and wasn't as emotional. And you can make a case both, either way. It's more a matter of personal preference, but I feel like a good story should strive to do both and not sacrifice one for the other. I don't know. I think Avengers was playing more in the Russell T Davies model of, we want to make sure these emotional moments really land. And if we have to hand wave away some of these technical things, fine. But then don't intentionally put such a massive plot device in your story like 5 years later, which by its own existence demands all of this attention to the technicality around it. Like, well, you're telling me the world is in a worse place. You're telling me all these people, like, all these things happen when you suddenly reintroduce half the population again. that requires its own explanation. Or give me some acknowledge that in some way.
Well, and you had I was almost prepared to sort of hand wave a lot of that. And then you had this great example from the film that I think totally demonstrates, it's a wonderful film, but there's the Spider-Man example of Peter going back to school, which I'll let you tell, which I think is just so perfect.
You see Peter Parker at the end, as they're wrapping up everybody's point of view story. Peter Parker's back in school. He sees Ned. Ned looks at him and starts crying and hugging him immediately. Peter Parker's kind of like, yeah, man, tough time. I mean, Peter is a lot more put together in that scene than Ned is. You get the impression that Ned has been at school missing his best friend for 5 years. So why is Ned not older? Why has Ned not graduated? Why is this all still happening? So the easy explanation is, well, Ned got disappeared too. Fine, but then don't show me that scene that suggests all these questions that leaves me more confused.
Right.
I shouldn't leave the theater obsessing over these things. I should leave the theater going, holy shit, Robert Downey Jr., holy shit, Steve Rogers, like all of these. I shouldn't be thinking, well, what the hell is that about? When are we going to find that? It ruins the coda in such a non-essential way.
Well, and I like your 5 years aspect. Like that is so that point of like jumping into it is so interesting to me, because what I sat with was the existentialism of all of this, and thinking like, if an awful like event happened like this, number one, I guess I'm just not that cynical of a person. And I think human resilience would have actually cleaned up the planet. And I found myself watching the movie, not on Thanos' side, but thinking like, I actually don't think the neighborhoods would be worse. I think they might actually be better off. you know, like they would be, I think in 5 years we would have moved all the abandoned cars out of the neighborhood, but I also thought if you've lived with this for so long, the danger of this proposed solution, I think, would just be magnified like that much more. The risks of this one chance in 14 million that could pay off. And it was weird that, like, I don't know. It was weird, but also, I guess, perfect for his character, that Tony is at once the one trying to enjoy the present moment, and then also the one that realizes he's going to obsess about fixing it until he does it. Like, it's going to drive me crazy if I throw it in the ocean or whatever his solution.
Yeah.
But I just, especially, and it's funny because in our last episode, you talked about this comic book called Thanos Wins.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking of, so I had this idea of talking about Thanos like before we even saw Endgame. And that was that, Thanos like literally means death. And I think it's so interesting in the books when there is another character called Death.
And that he's obsessing over.
Right.
Himself.
And it's like, well, wait, aren't you making him the personification of death itself? And so in the movie, I don't know. Granted, it's a superhero movie, but I almost saw it as like, after 5 years, maybe the heroes would just start to think of Thanos not as an alien being, but as like a literal natural disaster of death that hit the planet. And wouldn't they just sort of live with it, especially after they go kill him? Well,
they kind of did. I mean, think about it. Like Black Widow's running sort of what's left, and they're trying to just continue on.
Yeah.
Stark is the one who, they all sort of fall apart in their own interesting ways. Cap's running that support group, trying to eke out his life there. Black Widow's getting more depressed. All of these, Hulk is having an identity crisis, literally and figuratively.
Yeah,
there's all these things happening. And Tony's kind of like, his version of falling apart is like, I'm just going to have this insanely normal life now.
Yeah, and don't forget Hawkeye, who goes on this vengeance rampage that is nuts.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's talk more about this time travel aspect too. They made it very clear when they were setting it up, when they were teasing it. They did a great job of at least giving an ear to, well, what if we do this? What should happen? And explaining to the audience their rules for time travel. Because the easy thing to do is assume it's all back to the future. It's, you go back, you change something, it changes it in the present. We've been conditioned on that logic for 30 goddamn years now. So for them to say, if you go, that the past you go to is your future, I'm like, yeah, for those people, but the past is still the past for everybody else in the past relative to the future. I don't understand this logic of, we change something in 1970, but then it doesn't change the future. Wouldn't when you go back into the future, you're not in your own future anymore. You're in a parallel future. You're in the divergent timeline that you created by simply going to the past. That would have made at least a little more sense, but they had this weird, they kind of had their cake and ate it too with time travel, which just almost makes it, I wish they hadn't done it if they were going to be that fast and loose with it.
Well, I actually didn't get the fast and loose vibe from it. I actually thought the idea of the what is it that Scott goes to? The
quantum realm.
The quantum realm. I actually thought that was an interesting way to solve a time travel dilemma. And I thought it was a good moment of humor where he's trying to describe it as not a time machine, and then he's like, yeah, it's a time machine. Like I don't know. I just liked that solution. It wasn't. I don't know. I
wish they'd called it reality hopping then, because that would have fit together a little bit better. Like, we're going to hop into different realities and grab. Because let me paint this picture for you. When I heard that the quantum realm was going to be a heavy part in this, and that they may travel through time, my mind immediately did think, well, wouldn't it be cool if they're going to really have their cake and eat it too, and be as fan servicey as they can? Wouldn't it be cool if they found a way to make it reality, space and time, or just different realities in general, different universes they could go to pull the Infinity Stones, and they could even end up in a universe really quickly. They could almost be like this montage of different, almost like when in Guardians of the Galaxy they're jumping again and again, and you see little glimpses. You see Stan Lee talking to the Watchers and all that stuff. Imagine they're going through different realities, and there's one where they're all in the traditional costumes. Scarlet Witch has got the weird and mascot. Like, there could have been some really cool, like, we're going to put them in the most comics relevant costumes ever. But just at least this idea of realities being where they're going. Because at one point they go back and they interact in the events of 2012 Avengers, which was cool to see. But then Loki takes the Tesseract and leaves. So clearly that is not the Loki that died in Infinity War. So what is that? Is that a different reality, a different time? We just call it a different reality.
I know. And it's like, there's that, it's not belabored. It's actually pretty simply put when whatever her name is, Tilda Swinton's character, is explaining to Bruce, like, no, but when you take this out, you're going to part this reality. Like, she does it. I mean, that's a great visual. Now there's going to be this history, and then there's going to be this history, and the stone's back right here. And it's like, okay, yeah, great, that'll work. But as soon as Loki takes that Tesseract, as soon as Hawkeye takes the baseball glove from his kid, like, man, that's all butterfly effect shit that Ashton Kutcher explained to us years ago. Like, every little moment you
I like that movie, by the way.
It's gonna fuck something up. I also think of Homer Simpson going back into the prehistoric past and accidentally stepping on a bug, and then.
That was a beautiful episode. Well, so it makes me want, like, they clearly knew what they were getting into. They clearly took the time to say, here's how our time travel logic works. And then nobody told them, well, that doesn't really make sense, guys. Yeah. It felt, I don't know. There's just, and I don't know why I get so persnickety about that when there are so many other things you just sort of accept on their face that are equally ridiculous. Right. I think it is because we've had so much shared history of storytelling and time travel where time travel works a very specific way and a very logical way. Like, you can't fault back to nothing in Back to the Future time travel. You could say it's physically impossible in terms of the way quantum physics works or anything, but just the logic of you go back, you change one thing, it impacts the present. You could get Biff's Casino if you do one little thing wrong. Yeah. I like that. Like, that they could have had more fun with that if they were loyal to it, or it would have been less distracting if they just said, we're going back to different realities to gather the stones again. I don't know.
I totally agree with you that it's ridiculous to, like, nitpick something like that when there are other more like, the fact that we're like, hey, that green monster is fine. But that time traveling is bullshit. I mean, it's like we're literally having the same commentary that Scott Lang did when he's like, "You're telling me Back to the Future is bullshit." But it's a thing you and I have talked about with comics on several past episodes. I can think of Rocket Girl in particular, but a lot of them wherever some time travel comes in, it's like, man, not only is there like a dicey logic to it, but there are so many landmines on. Like, it's almost like as soon as you introduce time travel, you're introducing so many audience members who are going to go, but what about this? Like, that's your danger. It's not so much your story, because none of that affected my appreciation of Endgame. Like, I loved Endgame. I bought into that stuff. I was down with it. To me, the question was the 5-year time jump of just thinking of it like a human being. Like, God, wouldn't you have cleaned up your neighborhood and, like, gotten on with your life?
I just going back to the 5-year thing real quick. Does this mean every movie now we see that's not some kind of crazy space thing? Is it always going to be 5 years in the future until we hit 2023 ourselves? I
think that's a problem, which is weird. And I don't know that we care. Like, it's not like it's such a reality based series that they have to establish that. But I'll tell you another question is why didn't Michelle Pfeiffer come back as a 35-year-old woman? Like,
there's a great question. I mean,
she was in the quantum realm for 30 years or something. Like, she should come back 30 years younger, or just 30 hours older.
She does seem to have the Paul Rudd genes, though. She does. She ages so gracefully. You're like,
Exactly.
Michael
Beautiful
Douglas looks
woman.
much older than you do right now, Michelle, and you're
Yeah.
supposed to be married with a kid. So
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Should we jump into character moments that we really love?
yeah.
Okay.
I think let's. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say do we build up to Tony or do we just start with Tony?
Oh, I was gonna say, do we build up to Fat Thor? That was
Oh my God,
such a delightful,
I was gonna drop
unexpected
that right
surprise.
in the faves.
All right. We'll save it for the faves.
But no, I mean, I loved that he stayed fat for the whole movie.
Yeah.
I was so sure that he was going to activate some lightning power and then be svelte all of a sudden. Like, he's rock hard at that moment. But
especially when we consider Jane Foster becomes all buff and everything when she in the comics when she becomes Lady Thor. Just Thor.
Right.
That's so you kind of thought, oh yeah, but I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad in that final battle he's just this husky, Big Lebowski looking guy.
I did love when the lightning hits him and his beard gets braided or whatever.
Yeah.
That was, and I think it led into the moment with Valkyrie at the end, which was so nice and so perfect of handing the reins of command to her.
It did kind of feel like they didn't intend to include Valkyrie and the other Asgardians until everybody started bitching about it after Infinity War. Like, where are they? And they're like, they're right here. Okay, here they are. Here's Korg and here's Meek, and here they are. And everybody's fine. Okay.
It did, yeah. I too got that impression. And like you pointed out, they've somehow saved Loki so that he's not dead.
Yeah, but think about this, right? So that is the percentage of Asgardians who made it off Asgard before Hela destroyed it. So she killed like so many Asgardians anyway. They made it off. Then this is also the percentage of the group that made it away from the ship when Thanos attacked and made it to Earth. So it's such a small group of Asgardians right now. They say New Asgard and Valkyrie's their king or queen, but of what? This village? How? Yeah. It's so small. I kind of commend them for trying to make it as best they can. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, to Thor. Yeah, great.
Fat Thor. I'm going to say this is my favorite Ant-Man movie. Paul Rudd just brought it this entire time. I told this to Rachel. I'm going to say it right now. I think if Paul Rudd if properly guided or motivated, he could be like Robin Williams, where he has these amazing comedic performances, and then on a dime, he delivers these incredibly deep, rich, sad character studies that Robin Williams is so good at doing. You see him and his daughter in that scene. You're just like, holy crap, Paul Rudd has range. Yeah. I never knew. I never thought Brian Fantana could make me feel.
Oh man, you sir have not watched Clueless.
I remember Clueless. He
really made anyone with a heart love him in that. Anyway, I mean, it's not my favorite Ant-Man movie, but yeah, Paul Rudd, him and Fat Thor, and I mean, geez, none of us can say enough of what a great job Marvel has done with these actors that create these personalities that are so different and work together so well. And you look at like Justice League, where it was, 4 of the same personality, and Aquaman and Flash,
That's so true.
Yeah. And I mean, their moms are in Batman v Superman literally have the same name.
God. It was interesting. I will say too, this is probably, I heard mentions of this or murmurs of this before during the premiere and before I saw it, but I would not be surprised if Robert Downey Jr. doesn't win a Golden Globe or get nominated for something for Best Acting in this, because he's maybe not an Oscar, but something along those lines. He was magnificent. This is some of the best acting he's put out for a while.
Yeah,
he had some serious range too.
He's amazing. My only beef is with the Tony character itself. And there was this one moment that I wanted to highlight, because at one time I think I think it is very realistic, which is when he's angry at Cap, and I got that this is a misplaced anger. Like this is a man who's been stranded on a planet, watched everyone on the planet with him die, including this kid that he's very fond of. his surrogate son in a way. And it's like he's very affected and he's lashing out. I got it. But like people who lash out, what he said is so crazy when he's sort of blaming Cap for I saw this coming and I wanted to put up this defense shield. And it was so hard in that moment. I think Chris Evans did a great job of this, of like just standing there and taking it.
Mhm.
But man, I kept thinking like, Cap, just say the word Ultron to him. Like, yeah, you wanted a planetary defense. Remember, it turned into Ultron and literally wiped out an entire city.
To be fair to Cap, though, and you sort of hinted at this, so I know you get it. But to be fair to Cap, this guy was hysterical.
Oh,
he
yeah,
was
yeah.
he was starving. He hadn't eaten
Yeah,
in however long. He was marooned on that ship for 3 weeks with Nebula. He went through all these tragedies. So it's like for him to say that might have put him in a coma.
No, I agree. Yeah, he was definitely caring for Tony in that moment.
Tactful.
But we started this podcast after a big rant of mine about Tony the War Profiteer, and
that's a great point.
Really, stop thinking of it that way. Of like that's there's this weird. I don't know. There, I don't have the affection for Tony that other people do, and that's probably a great moment to mention what I told you last night, which was none of the little children in the theater with me knew that Tony was going to die.
Oh no.
I wouldn't go so far as to say they lost their shit, but there was a lot of concerned murmuring to adults around them. Like they were very worried. There was a whole row of children in front of me, and it just was like, oh my God, Iron Man, oh, mommy. Yeah.
Oh wow.
They did not believe it. It was amazing.
Well, think about how transformative that's going to be for kids. This might be their first movie death. This may be as impactful to them as Bambi's mom dying was, or anything from our childhood. That's trying to think of like a really good example.
They weren't that concerned with Black Widow dying. I'll tell you that.
Well, let's talk about a character scene that I didn't care for. Was that anything involving Vormir and her and Hawkeye? I applaud the fact that they were both. I mean, I like the sort of trying to drag each other down so that the other one could do it. But that whole sequence lacked. I just didn't care as much as I cared about every other moment. And I'm like, this should be really meaningful. And I don't know if it's because he got the Red Skull hanging out behind him, just like I will stand here and watch while you guys figure it out, or if it was just the fact that she.
Was there any doubt in your mind of whom would fall?
No, it made too much sense. You don't take away Clint's family and then take him away if they're going to come back. Like that would be cruel, and cruel to Hawkeye, and especially because he wasn't even in the last one. You're like, okay, what a weird way for him to go out.
Well, and I agree. For some reason, it didn't have the impact. Because we'd already seen that happen with Gamora, and that had so much impact.
Yeah.
Having just rewatched Infinity War, and actually you did too, like when she tries to kill herself rather than let Thanos kill her and he turns the knife into bubbles, it's like, every moment of that, I was just hanging on. And with Black Widow, it wasn't like that. I mean, I really thought that fight was well executed, and I loved that like last minute, whenever I don't know if he jumps over the cliff or something, and then she does the rope thing, or he does that or whatever. I don't know I can't remember how that went down, but I remember being like, oh, great switcheroo right there. But still, I thought all along it's going to be Black Widow, and I don't know. I didn't feel like, I don't know.
More importantly, why did Nebula not tell them what was going to happen? She knew.
I wondered that too.
She freaking knew. There's a whole moment in the last one where she's on on Titan, and she's like, he did it.
Yeah.
She confirms that she knows what she's doing, what happened. Yeah. She told them where to go, like go to Vormir. That's where the Soul Stone is. Oh, and by the way, one of you is probably going to have to die for it to like, why?
Yeah. I mean, I guess
information.
It had to be a trade, but
maybe.
But also, I thought the rub in the first movie was it didn't necessarily have to be a person. It just had to be something you loved. And Gamora's like, he doesn't love anything.
Yeah.
you know, it was very clear
So
cut.
Hawkeye could have thrown his bow and arrow over and be like, goodbye.
Exactly. Well, this is my favorite knife. It's got a can opener on it.
It'd be funny if like he holds his bow over the edge and like he looks back at Black Widow and she's like, "Go on," and he's like, the tear comes to his eye, he drops it, and then that beam shoots in the sky. It's like,
I agree. I mean, I didn't want to dwell on her death too much, but I don't know. It just wasn't as satisfying an ending as Tony, because I did think that's the whole conundrum of Tony Stark, is that he is often selfless in a moment where he like absolutely has to be, and then he's a complete narcissist the rest of the time.
Yeah.
It's really, that's what makes him an interesting character, you know?
Yeah.
Did you know that Pepper Potts in an Iron Man suit is named Rescue?
I'd heard that when Iron Man 3 came out, and there were scenes of her with the helmet on, you know, but it's just his armor that she wears to get to safety when they're blowing up the mansion. And I remember everybody on Reddit going, "Oh, she's Rescue. She's doing the rescue." I'm like, okay, that's a thing, I guess.
Isn't it? Isn't it weird? Not to jump back too far to one of our old discussions on The Last Jedi and soft power with women, isn't it crazy that they can only, like, when a woman puts on the costume, it can't be warlike. It has to be like a soft power and like rescuing people. Whereas Rhodey puts on the same costume and he's a war machine. Out of here. That's so weird to me.
What about Valkyrie though? She's badass, and Valkyrie's
oh my god, that scene of like all the women.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Just so good. Like, just there were so many good nods in that last battle where it looked heavily. I mean, I know this doesn't make any sense. It was heavily CGI to the point where I was like, these people weren't even in the same room.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
but I loved the comic book look of it, and that look of like when you have a big event book and you do the full page spread with like all of the women or all of the Wakandans or, you know, all of the original Avengers. Like, I really, really love that.
On that note, the big shot that everybody's touting as just the quintessential full page splash page shot of the whole thing was that scene on the plains of the former Avengers facility where Thanos has then beamed down all of his shit, all of his army, everything's there, and it's just Cap standing by himself, and the sun is kind of setting through the clouds, and it's right before Sam tells him on the left. Yeah, it's such a great moment. Which, by the way, that was one of the scenes revealed in that 5-minute leaked footage that came out. So as soon as I saw that, and it was shaky footage, so it was so glorious to see it in full high def on, an actual screen. But the scene I saw was him standing there. You don't get the whole vista, but it was just him, and then you heard, "Hey Cap, on your left," and then like Black Panther and Shuri and Okoye walk out. So I remember seeing that, going, "Oh, I'm gonna be just fine in this movie."
I'm almost getting chilled right now thinking about it, but that definitely elicited like a huge round of shouts in my theater.
Yeah,
and when Cap gets the hammer, there was just an amazing surge of energy, and a guy across the aisle from me was shouted something which I can't remember, but it was just like, "Oh snap," or something like genuine shock and pleasure and joy in that moment. Like, that was so pure, and I loved that there was no learning curve. In so many other movies, I would have been like, "Oh, come on, you don't know how to use that." But just the fact that it's Cap, it was like, yeah, you know how to use that. He was
even channeling the thunder. He was channeling the light. I was like, oh God, he can even do that too. That's pretty cool.
Like, he's a natural with it. It was perfect.
It was awesome.
I got to touch on the other Cap moment, which is Old Man Steve and Falcon at the end, which is so perfectly like almost straight out of the comics. I can't remember how it happens, but when Sam becomes Captain America, Steve is in fact old. And he was such a great mirroring of the comics, like such a great like fan service in that way. But I just loved, Sam approaching him. It was like, "Hey, did things go wrong or did they go right?" That was beautiful. And because right before that too, I thought, wow, I can't believe we lost Tony. And Steve is still Steve. And I don't know, not that I wanted him to go, but it was just a big moment.
Yeah, no, I have more to say on that in just a second because it dovetails into something I didn't quite care for.
Oh, okay. Well,
I love that moment. I love that moment. And by the way, holy crap, as good as Marvel is at de-aging people, they're even better at making them older. That was some of the best old age CGI I've ever seen. I mean, it wasn't makeup. It was old age CGI. He looked like Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, he sure did. I did a double take, or triple take. Like, is this still Chris Evans? What's going on?
I mean, that's what Chris Evans is going to look like when he's that old. It's going to be really weird to see. I did for a hot second think that for some bizarre reason we were seeing like he maybe the past got screwed up and that was like scrawny Steve Rogers sitting there.
I thought that too. I thought he originally, until Falcon, until the camera moved, I thought he'd gone back in time and not taken the serum.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I'm glad that wasn't the case. I mean, what we got was better. But do you want to talk? I mean, we can keep going, but I kind of want to get into our maybe 3 to 5 favorite moments and 3 to 5 least favorite moments, because I think that will cover a lot of ground pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a good place. I can tell you, for better or worse, we've pretty much covered my faves. I had Thor in there. I had Seeing the Women of Marvel in there, and probably the Steve scene at the end. So what about yourself?
I think that entire sequence where Sam goes on your left from that point on, was just, and it was such a beautiful callback to Winter Soldier when Cap passes him on the lake in DC. He's like, on your left. So to have Sam say that to him right then and there, which is great because the screenwriters, Marcus and McFeely, wrote this, Infinity War, Civil War, Winter Soldier, and unbelievably Thor: The Dark World, which they had a co-writer on as well. So that's why Thor: The Dark World got such a weird shout out in this movie. It was like, we wrote that one, we're going to go back.
And there was the Russo brothers for all of those movies too, right?
Not Thor: The Dark World.
No, oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Not Dark.
But yeah, those 4, Civil War, Winter Soldier, and then the last 2 Infinity movies. Wow. Which makes you wonder what would have happened had Joss Whedon not burnt out. If he had stuck around, like what would we have gotten instead? It's very interesting. Because it would have been him writing it or co-writing it as well. And we could have wound up with something very different, probably satisfying, but very, very different.
Well, and it's still weird too, because we talked about this in our Game of Thrones episode last night, our Wednesday in Westeros podcast, where we said you can see Miguel Sapochnik, the director, like learning from his own, not mistakes, but like honing his skills. And I feel that way. Like I know it came chronologically first, but I really loved Winter Soldier and then did not like Civil War as much. Like I thought, just sort of story wise, it was kind of a mess. But then have, loved Infinity War and Endgame. And I feel like I could see this movie, to me, felt like such a culmination of all the great ideas and the great character moments and the great action. And, they got it right.
So my three favorite moments, that one is that scene where all the portals open up and you see everybody, and you even see things that I'm glad we saw, like all the other sorcerers from like, because in Infinity War I'm like, is it just Strange and Wong left? I thought there was a lot more people training at that center. So a bunch of them come through and you're like, oh good, there they all are. And just everybody else they made room for. There was one person in the theater who, after where the credits were going, was like, why didn't they include the Defenders from Netflix? And I was like, that was never going to happen. The only TV character we ever got was Jarvis from Agent Carter. That's the only thing. Like
really?
That
That's the same one?
Yeah, it's the guy who, because Marcus and McFeely also co-wrote or co-created the Agent Carter series.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Peggy is in both.
Well, yeah, but she started in the movies, then moved to TV, and then came back.
Agent Carter's like not part of the Defenders world, right? Like,
no, not at all. That was an ABC show. I was a little surprised not to see Coulson have anything to do with this in any way, shape, or form. Especially because they made a big deal about bringing him into Captain Marvel. They're like, look, he's alive in the 90s. So you thought, well, maybe he'd be at the Tony Stark scene, funeral scene or something. You'd think maybe that he'd pop up.
But he died in Avengers.
Yeah, but man, it's like that's part of the Agents of Shield show is supposed to be in continuity, and so you're like, okay, I get it. It's there's only so much time, but just the fact that goddamn Jessica Jones is going to show up in this show, never, or this movie, never going to happen. I just the people who
No.
it's like
Or
the same people who
freaking
think Lady
Iron
Stoneheart is
Fist or whatever.
still coming. It's like it's not going to happen. She's not coming. Jessica Jones isn't coming to this party either. It's just no. So so that scene, I would say. My God, I adored the first Iron Man movie, and I'm even a big fan of Iron Man 2, believe it or not. So that last moment when he's got the glove and he just says, "I am Iron," I am Iron Man back. And what happens? The fact that all of Thanos's people fade away, and that it was such a beautiful scene of poetic justice. Mirroring the end of Infinity War. That was just like what an amazing baller move.
Yeah.
And then probably my other favorite moment, which could have been my absolute favorite moment if they had played it differently. Let me just paint this picture for you. Imagine if when the Thanos mothership turns its guns and starts firing into the sky like it's the Matrix, and they're all like, turn their attention, and you hadn't seen Carol up until this point. If she was absent from the movie until this moment, they're like, what are they firing at? Something's coming in the atmosphere. And it's goddamn her with the short hair. Think about how bad, you would have jumped from your seat just with excitement. Finally, because the whole time you're like, where is she? Where's she coming?
Yeah.
If that was when she finally made it back.
I can see that. But I was already missing all my other favorite characters so much through the movie that if she hadn't been in it, I would have been really bummed.
Oh, but that would have been such a triumphant return. It's like, what's coming? Holy shit, it's her, and she's got the short hair, and because it would have taken her that long to make it back after the pager. That would have made sense. Like, it's been 6 years or 5 years or whatever. Here she is. Finally, she's back.
Well, I loved that. I loved her role in the original killing of Thanos. Like, I thought that was great. That she sort of took over the Iron Man role, and they left him on Earth. And I just thought that was really well done. And I loved that, like, watching how, like, it was literally like the video from How It Should Have Ended, like the plan worked. They all got in there, took the arm off,
So true.
And it was perfect.
That's so true. God, that is a How It Should Have Ended moment. Almost verbatim.
Literally. Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah.
Thor just comes in and chops off his head. It's like, that's it. We're done. Yeah. So I hate to do this, but I got to talk about my least favorite moments too, because while I absolutely love this movie, there were some parts that I keep gnawing at me. And I'm like, ugh, God, I wish they had tidied these up. One of them is just oh, you know what? Before I do this, there is one. I do have a fourth favorite moment that I just want to put out there. I loved when they went to Avengers 2012. Tony sees the backside of the scene that we saw, where Loki's looking up at them gathered around him, and then we get to see the backside of that same scene, and then the unbelievably mundane business that occurs after that. Like, we didn't get to see it as the audience the first time around, but it's like, okay, they have to escort him down, and they got to ride the elevator, and just like all these very mechanical sort of just administrative things kind of happen. It's like, oh, that's really fun. So that's my other favorite scene. But like the things that really kind of rub me weird afterwards are just the convoluted nature of the time travel story.
Yeah.
We talked about that already. I don't want to rehash that. Something more, probably even more important and glaring to me as I was reconsidering Infinity War. Remember in that movie, Vision has the Mind Stone.
Yep.
And he says right out of the gate, like, look, Wanda, you've got to destroy this thing right now. Let's just end this right now. And Steve Rogers goes, no, that's not who we are. We don't sacrifice one person for the good of everybody. Like, we don't do that. And then in this movie, they're doing it left and right. Like, everybody's sacrificing somebody. And it's like, and Vision wanted it to happen. It wasn't like they were forcing it on him. He volunteered. He's like, look, you got to do this. And
it's such an enormous fuck up of the first movie.
But it's like if they had just done that, which is they were all prepared to do it now, and you could argue, well, yeah, but they've learned the lesson of. But then give me a little dialogue, like, give me some scene with Steve where he's like, I wish I had listened to Vision or something like that, because it lessens the impact of Black Widow's
Death,
sacrifice.
for sure. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because that bounces off of something. So yeah, we just watched Game of Thrones episode 3 last night, the long night, and recorded a podcast on it. So you and I have talked a shitload about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was sort of metagaming all the like strategy of that battle. And then I realized this morning as I was listening back to our podcast, like, actually, it's not that I wish that like a strategy would go right. I understand like the strategy gets fucked up as soon as you hit the enemy, blah, blah, blah. But I want to see the characters go, I should have done this.
Yeah.
And you're so right. Like Steve should have said, look, we don't trade a life for life. At least that's what I thought.
Yeah.
But I was wrong. Like Vision was right. Like, and yeah, exactly. Like if your plan goes wrong, then later on, like it would have been so satisfying, I think, when Davos watches, sorry to go to Game of Thrones, watches those White Walkers jump into the fire. If he had gone, God damn it, there goes that plan, like
yeah. And he could be salty about it too. That was his nature. He would have been the perfect character to deliver that scene. So yeah, it would have been great for Steve's overall story if he's like Vision was trying to tell us that, he was more of a hero than any of us. He was ready to sacrifice himself right then and there, and we wouldn't let him. So we can't make that same mistake this time. Like that's all he would needed to have said. And it's like, holy shit, now all of these potential deaths mean even more because they realize how wrong they are and they're ready to make, to do right by Vision, which by the way, he doesn't come back at all. There's no I thought maybe there'd be some kind of statue to him or something, in Wakanda, or maybe they'd be working on his body. But no, nothing. He's just gone.
Is it not Paul Bettany's voice in Old Man Jarvis? Like that's with
maybe they may have done like an ADR recording of it or something.
I also didn't know that character was in Agent Carter. So
yeah. No, it may have been ADR because it did kind of sound like Paul Bettany's voice, but
I heard what I wanted to hear.
yeah. And then let's see what else has the 5 years thing, the time travel, the sacrifice, this idea that we don't sacrifice one.
Well, let me ask you this. So not that we wanted to see any of these characters meet a vicious end, but like the Game of Thrones episode last night, I thought we were going to see more big name departures.
I agree. I'm not glad that we didn't, but it is surprising nonetheless.
Like what's Bucky gonna do now? I don't care about Bucky. I never have. Like, get rid of that guy.
Well, he gets his own TV show
again. Oh, seriously?
He and Sam. Yeah, it's Winter Soldier and Hawkeye the Falcon get a show.
Man, fuck Winter Soldier. That guy is a contract killer.
Maybe it's about his redemption. Maybe he's like a soldier for hire on the underground, and he's trying to make like the A team. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Oh, I know so my other least favorite moment. I did not like the logic behind Steve taking all the stones back. Just falls flat on its face. They didn't even give him a spaceship. How the hell is he going to get to Vormir? How the hell is he going to get the Power Stone back to where it needs to go? And even if he gets to Vormir, he's going to confront the Red Skull again. Well, how's that going to go? Like, there's so much that's like, wait a second, this one guy is going to do this all, and we're just going to accept it. I mean, fine, but ugh.
I think what I thought was going to happen there, although I don't remember exactly what I was thinking in the theater, but I think my brain had composed this idea of like, okay, I bet the remaining original Avengers each take one stone and none of them comes back.
God, that'd be cool.
But that
would match the comics too, because after I think in all the Infinity stuff, they whether it's the Illuminati or the Avengers, they all they split them up, and like somebody's sort of responsible for a specific stone. That would have made way more sense. Or what does he do? Does he give the Soul Stone back, and Black Widow just comes back? Like, how does that work? I mean, there's so many questions.
This weird thing you've created, Marvel.
You don't create more questions.
Yeah. Well, I did appreciate that was, this sounds weird. I did appreciate that was hand waved in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, don't think too much about this. They got him out of time really quickly. Like, there was no planning about it. There could never be that moment of Hulk, like the machine not working or something.
Yeah.
Because then you would have had another second to think about, wait, what are you doing? This is a stupid plan.
Yeah, that's true. Full steam ahead, guys. Don't think it. Don't overthink
I
it.
think it was all redeemed in the Sam Steve moments at the end there.
Did you want to have? I mean, I almost kind of feel like if Steve Rogers hadn't written a note to Tony in Civil War with the phone, that when they tried to bring him back 5 seconds later, only his shield appears with a note, and it's for Sam, and Sam has to read it. I mean, that would have been real. And then you never see Steve old. He's just trapped in the past with Peggy.
Huh.
I mean, I love the scene with old Chris Evans. That was great,
Yeah.
but I almost wonder if he hadn't written that note, if we would have gotten hey Sam, here's the shield, be everything I hope you can be, blah blah blah.
I gotta sound like a total dunce. What is the note you're talking about?
At the end of Civil War, Tony gets the burner phone, and it's got a note from Steve. Hey Tony, it's like, I'm so sorry this happened, but if you ever need me, call me.
Right.
That note, because it would have been exactly the same moment if a note appeared on a shield to Sam. So it's like you don't just repeat that. But I wonder if they hadn't used that up, if that would have been. I
see what you're saying. I thought he left a note to himself when he went back.
Oh,
no. Or something. I was like, wait, what?
No, that's fine.
It wasn't it weird. I don't know. I was going to add to that, but I think that had to be that fan service to people in the comics. There was one other moment of fan service that I wondered if you saw. Correct me if I'm wrong.
There's half the
no, there are many, but it's specifically because you mentioned it on last week's podcast. Isn't there a second in Endgame where Thanos picks Tony up and looks like he's about to rip him in half?
Ooh.
Like that happens, and then he gets hit with the hammer or something.
Wow, I was not paying attention.
Oh, my brain was like, "Holy shit, that's the scene Taylor described out of Thanos Wins."
Oh God,
you gotta watch. It's in the final battle. So
okay.
Yeah. I really wonder if what a recent bit of fan service, but maybe kind of put in there, for people who read the Thanos book and went, "Oh my God, he's gonna rip him in half," and then it doesn't happen.
I'm glad I did read the Thanos book before I saw Endgame, because there was some parallel. You could tell part of it is because the Thanos in the comics now is more mirroring Josh Brolin's character. But there was some, even just the way he said, "I'm inevitable," just sort of the menacing side of him was a lot more apparent in this movie. And I like that. That was kind of more what the Thanos Wins character was about. Just this inevitable march to domination and being sort of the one and only in the universe.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, I feel like we need to put a period on the end of this sentence too.
Yeah. There's so much more we could say, but I want to be clear. Like, I loved it. I'll see it again in the theaters for sure.
Yeah.
I thought it gave me everything I was looking for. We'll debate the technicalities for 10 more years, I'm sure.
There's just never been it goes without saying, I guess, but there's never been a series of superhero movies so well done as all of these MCU movies. So it is, like you pointed out earlier, there are so many other absurd things that we accept. And I think they're sort of beyond criticism at this point. They've done it. Like they could just rest on these laurels for 50 years.
I'm glad the movies are. And you know what? I'll probably see Far From Home because I'm really invested in the MJ Peter relationship now that Zendaya is more front and center. I'm a shipper hardcore for that whole thing. But and Mysterio is my favorite Spider-Man rogue. But I'm kind of like, I may put a pause in going to another MCU movie because the TV shows look way more interesting to me. The WandaVision series especially looks really interesting if they do it right. That may be where I sort of settle, and I may see the odd movie, but I may be done. I mean, I'll see the X-Men movie because it's the last one. That's not MCU.
I don't think that counts as MCU.
No, it's not. It's not an MCU movie, but that'll be the last sort of superhero movie this summer I probably see, and then I'm probably done with the MCU. Just until something really truly interesting comes along. If the Eternals ends up being just this mind-blowing avant-garde thing, I'll see it. But I think I may join them.
I would love to see Guardians of the Galaxy with Thor in it.
Now that Gunn's directing, that's going to be more interesting again. So
yeah, I'm super excited about that. I'm glad you brought up Far From Home because I kind of wish Nick Fury had bought it in some way. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm tired of him. He was duped by Hydra and worked for them for years. He's like an awful, awful character. Yeah.
like
yeah, of all the people that I guess he never would have brought this. It would have been great if he had been on Vormir and they sacrificed him, even knowing that they didn't actually love him. And the Soulstone doesn't appear, and they're like, yeah, we know.
Oh God,
we just needed to sacrifice him somewhere. He's terrible. Yeah, I mean, I don't care to see him in Far From Home, and I know he's in it, and that annoys me.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't necessarily feel the same way because I would definitely see Guardians, anything with Ant-Man that comes along. I don't care to see the original Avengers anymore, but like Falcon as Cap or Sam as Cap, yeah, that's awesome.
I want them to do something different besides costumes with angular lines and the same kind of beats. And it's nothing against it, but they've done it now. I want it to be.
This needs to be a wash the hands moment of. Yeah,
you're gonna hate me for saying this, but I want the MCU now to have its Joaquin Phoenix Joker moment where it's like we're just gonna go in all kinds of crazy directions and follow us if you want.
Well, I guess they're going to try out this TV experiment. I was not aware of the Bucky Cap or Bucky Sam situation. There's
a Loki show, Through Time show. Yeah, there's like a Quantum Leap Loki show.
I would watch a Loki show if it were him as like a talk show host on whatever the Jeff Goldblum planet is. Like if he were on the Garbage Planet interviewing people like a post. Like he's the wrestling game after show. So when they have a fight in the stadium and then they come up and talk to Loki, afterwards, that would be great.
How amazing. Because then, I mean, that could be super low budget. Hiddleston could just be on a soundstage somewhere. He wouldn't have to even be on location. He could just treat it like a day job. God, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. When the hat with the horn.
No, but they're doing and it's probably now that he has the Tesseract, it makes more sense. But they're going to do like a Loki Through Time, like at these pivotal moments in time where he's sort of the hero of his own story. That's what I've read.
With Hiddleston?
Yeah. They're paying all these guys movie money to do these shows.
Buku, yeah. That is a weirder experiment to me than the crazy idea of let's see if we can do 10 years of MCU movies.
Yeah, maybe they'll do 10 years of D plus shows.
Like, I don't know, but maybe they're going to do them like the Star Wars thing, and it's very limited, or like the Mandalorian, where it's like, hey, there's just 6 episodes.
That's what WandaVision's going to be. It's going to be 6.
Okay,
yeah, same thing.
Great. Yeah, no Flash 25 episodes to a season or whatever. Like none of that shit.
No, I wouldn't. I do not have the patience for that. I want nice, compact storytelling. Which, by the way, the fault of the Netflix Defenders shows are that they were all 4 episodes too long. It's like they were all 10 or 12 and they should have been 6 or 7. And so the D plus
in some cases there were 6 or 8 episodes too long.
Yeah.
We should wrap this up. Where can people find us?
Wherever you find podcasts. If you're listening to this on our stream, search for and subscribe to Panelism on Pocket Cast, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all those good places. And if you haven't yet, find all our past episodes on panelism.inc. That's panelism.ink. And if you're listening to us and you've never been to our Instagram account, that is also panelism.ink. We post all kinds of cool stuff, comics panels, book reviews, cool art, everything else. Go and follow us there. And one more plug, Ola. We have a sister show called Wednesday in Westeros, which is nearing its end. 3 more episodes left. So if you like Game of Thrones and you want to hear about it or hear people talk about it the very next day, we put it out on Mondays for the duration of this season. So go search for Wednesday in Westeros wherever you find podcasts. I'm out of things to promote.
I'm glad you plugged Westeros. That was what I was going to do, but now I don't have to do that. I can just say we are Panelism and we are inevitable.